Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and we had a chance to talk to Phil Cooke. Now, Phil's quite a guy. He's well respected and accepted throughout Hollywood. He's an international speaker and writer and filmmaker, and a great friend of this ministry. And we had a chance to talk to him about Hillary Clinton, about ISIS, and about Hollywood. So join me now as we talk to Phil. Well, today it's one of those great days and a high honor to have back with us our good friend Phil Cooke. He's an internationally known writer, speaker, filmmaker. I don't know what, he leaps tall buildings, eats Cheerios, he outruns locomotives, and what a great guy and an honor to have him. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, Perry. Thank you very much. That was quite an intro, maybe the best I've ever had.
Good to see you. Well, listen, so much to talk to you about. We chatted briefly at the NRB, but we were both in a hurry going opposite directions. First of all, your interesting article about Hillary Clinton, the perfect president for a nation that's given up. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. On my blog at philcooke.com, I don't write much about politics. In fact, I try to stay away from it. But I write about leadership, and I write about the intersection of faith, media, and culture. And I've just been so moved recently and so disgusted in many ways about the incredible trail of, scandal, of just unsavory relationships, of all kind of things that have been following her for decades. Mm-hmm. And I just think there's such a cynical viewpoint there that she just may end up being the perfect president for a nation who has gone cynical and pretty much given up.
Wow. Isn't that also a sad commentary on the church? Where are we in the argument, man?
That's a great discussion. I don't think the church should get obsessed with politics like we've done sometimes in the past. However, I do think a big part of this is speaking up. And I think calling people to integrity. One of the interesting things I point out in my blog about Hillary is that, whatever happened to ideals? Whatever happened to a country where we used to think our leaders should be above reproach? Our leaders should rise above the dust and the clatter and the filth and actually be examples for the next generation. It seems like we've just got so cynical, we've gotten so negative that it just rarely happens anymore where we actually have leaders that we admire. And I think that's a big place the church could speak into. We need to rekindle that passion for integrity, that passion for trust, that passion for excellence. I think that's something that we definitely need to be talking more about.
Phil, we take quite a few calls and a week here at theDove. We get a lot of letters and email responses for the programming and guests like you. And it usually boils down to two things. What is truth and who can I trust? Now, if that isn't the church's golden hour, I don't know what is.
It's true. Billy Graham said something interesting. I'm working on a new book, and I quote Billy saying that, for a past generation, the question is, what is truth? For this generation, the question really is, what's the point? And what I'm seeing in a younger generation coming up is they're just asking, what's the point of all this? Why am I doing this? Why do I care? And I think you're exactly right. This is the moment for the church to step up and speak into these things. We've done too good a job building a bubble that we can retreat into. And I think instead of doing that, we need to break out of that bubble and actually re-engage the culture again like the church used to do years ago. That can make the real difference.
And I want to talk to you about that in depth. But first of all, it appears, if you look, again, I don't want to go political either, but if you look at all the major issues that the church has been somewhat fighting against or fighting for, we haven't won any of them.
No, we haven't. We have it, and that's a valuable lesson, a really valuable lesson. I think the world wants to know less about what we're against and more about what we're for. It's true that when you just become against everything, when you boycott this and do a petition drive on that and complain about this, actually, after a while, people stop listening. In fact, I often use the illustration that if boycotts worked, why don't missionaries do it? Why don't missionaries go to a third world country, surround a tribe, hold up signs, criticize them, tell them they'll never buy anything from them until they become Christians? Well, boy, that'll really win them to Jesus. The truth is, nothing could be further from the truth. That missionaries don't do it because it doesn't work. So that boycotts don't work in Hollywood. They don't work with the gay community. They don't work with businesses. You have to be very strategic, very thought out for a boycott to work. In most cases, they backfire. So what do missionaries do? They get to know the people. They develop a trust relationship. They become one of them. They get on the inside. And that's how change really happens in people's hearts and minds. And so Hollywood is a great example. I think instead of complaining about Hollywood, Maybe it's time we started looking at Hollywood as a mission field, training Christians to get inside and start affecting change from the inside. That's when a real impact will start to happen.
You know, given that, look what's coming out of Hollywood. They seem to see that faith-based films sell. I mean, if you're going to look at it from money, it works, right?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. When Mark Burnett and Robert Downey's Bible TV series broke all the audience records out there last year, I got 3 calls from 3 major news networks, all baffled that anybody would be interested in watching a TV show about the Bible. And they weren't critical. They weren't condescending. They just didn't get it. They had no clue. And so I pointed out to them that Hollywood and the TV networks have spent years bending over backwards to cater to all kind of special interest groups like the gay community or environmentalists or feminists or others. But the truth is, Pew Research indicates there's nearly 100 million evangelical Christians in the U.S., which kind of makes us the biggest special interest group there is. So Hollywood is discovering for the first time in a very long time that there may just be really good business catering to such a large population group. So I think it's our moment to step out of the shadows and start supporting TV programs that we like, to go to the theater to see movies that we like. Because I'll tell you, if Hollywood pays attention to anything, it's box office. And when box office starts to go up, they make more of those kind of movies. So I think that's some place for us to really make a difference.
No question about it. Now, part of that debate, as you well know, Phil, because you've been in the middle of it, when Hollywood does come out with a film that may be faith-based, if it's not true to the letter, it gets a lot of criticism. What are we going to do with this? Where's the medium in that one?
That's a great question. I think there's places on both sides of the argument for us to stretch a little bit. I mean, I think we've got to give storytellers permission to really, you know, you can't, for instance, how do you cram David's life or Moses' life into a 90-minute movie? That's just really, really hard. So you have to make creative decisions about what you leave out, what you put in. And as Christians, I think if we start nitpicking them about everything, they're just going to stop doing it. And I think, on the other hand, Hollywood is starting to learn that the more accurate it becomes biblically, the bigger the box office. So there are voices like mine, there are voices like John Bach at Grace Hill Media, there are voices from other people who are working in the industry right now to help shape what they're doing and to influence them in a way that makes them understand that, look, the more biblical you tell this story, the bigger the audience will turn out. So they're starting to get that, which is a terrific thing. But I think, you know, there's room on both sides. Noah is a great example. Noah wasn't the biblical telling. You know, it had rock people and it was kind of wacky. However, I advocated for Christians to go see it. Right. In fact, I said, bring a non-believing friend to go see the movie and then go to a coffee shop later and tell them the real story. Because the truth is, millions of people went to see that movie. And I would rather have them go with a Christian who could really tell them the real story later than just go by themselves. So I think even when movies are off base, still often provides an opportunity for us to use as an evangelistic platform to share the gospel.
Well, that fits exactly what you're saying. Before we get into the whole terrorism thing, one other thing, besides the box office returns for Hollywood, do you think there is a genuine openness and hunger for the gospel inside Hollywood?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's a wonderful group here in town called the Hollywood Prayer Network, hollywoodprayernetwork.com, and I'd encourage your listeners to go check it out, your viewers to check it out. People are making a change from the inside in some interesting ways. You'd be surprised at the number of Christians that are in remarkably high levels in this industry. So people are directing projects and turning things and making decisions and really making a difference. So let me say there's place for hope. There's a real place for hope out there. I think that we should be praying. You know, again, turn Hollywood into a mission field. Stop criticizing and start praying. I think if we start praying for the industry, it'll make a dramatic difference. And I've discovered, for the record, that Perry, people who are even, you know, not even close to become a Christian love to be prayed for. I talked to someone recently and told them on a shoot that I was on. It was a secular shoot, a secular film shoot, a secular crew. And a young girl who was a production assistant, who was a Christian, stepped up. And right before our first shot, the first day of filming, she said, would anybody mind if we just kind of held hands for a second and prayed for the shoot? And you would not believe these burly, hardcore grips and gaffers who were not even remotely Christians fought their way to the front to grab somebody's hand to pray. Wow. So it's an interesting, it's almost a joke here in Hollywood that people may not like Christianity, but boy, they love to be prayed for. Oh. So if that's a doorway in, I'm going to take it.
What a great story. All right, I want to turn our attention quickly, and then I'll have to take a break and we'll come back. But we've been watching with great interest what happened in Texas all over what was a supposed First Amendment rally. Now you can compare what happened in Texas to what happened in Paris with the newspaper about cartoons about Muhammad. But nonetheless, what's your response to what's happening to the First Amendment and that whole thing in Texas?
Well, it's a great concern, huge concern. I've been really shocked at particularly at creative people, at the way writers have spoken out against what Pamela was doing there. And the truth is, that's not an event I would have staged. It's not something I would have wanted to be a part of. It's not something that I would have advocated for. However, there's no question that she had every right to do that. And I think that's what's happened is we've seen a lot of progressives come out and say, well, sure, we like freedom of speech, but let me tell you, whenever you hear someone say we love freedom of speech, but that's a cause for concern, because the minute you start limiting freedom of speech, we start getting into trouble. And trust me, it's Christians who they will come after first. So I think we need to fight with everything we have to be able to speak our mind. You know, a few years ago, the Supreme Court stated that the Nazis could march in Skokie, Illinois, a Jewish section of Skokie, Illinois, but the Nazis could march, even though it was offensive, even though it was obviously disgusting. They had a right to do it, and I think that's what America is all about. And we need to be able to. We need to have a country that fights to the death for any person's right to speak up. And so, anytime, it concerns me.
Yeah, after all, that wasn't fire in the theater, you know.
That's right. It wasn't fire in the theater. That's exactly right. And I think, and this is a problem, so it's something we definitely need to deal with.
Quick break. We'll be right back with Phil Cooke in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with Phil Cooke, and by the way, his website is Phil Cooke, that's COOKE.com, a great resource. Check out his many books. I've read most of them. I'm telling you, this guy is spot on in so many areas, and I encourage you to frequent his website. It's a great resource, Phil Cooke, COOKE.com. All right, we're back to the discussion of the First Amendment rally in Texas that sparked now it's being tagged as the first ISIS attack in the United States. Certainly not the first terrorist attack, but the first ISIS attack. And isn't it interesting, the Second Amendment was there to protect the First Amendment.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It kind of was, and it worked out that way. And it's very, I'm shocked because I'm a writer. I love, as you mentioned, my books and my website. I love to write. And so I was really concerned when people on the left started saying, well, we think freedom of speech is important, but we think that people shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that and they shouldn't do that. In fact, Saturday Night Live, I don't know if you saw it, had a really funny sketch the other night where they had a contest to draw Muhammad and nobody had the courage to do it. And it worries me when fear takes over, because we can't start saying, well, we can't say this and we can't say that, because we start getting into real trouble. Of course, that's what happened when the Nazis came to power in Germany during World War II. There were so many things you couldn't say, you couldn't do. I just talked to my friend Eric Metaxas this morning, who wrote the book Bonhoeffer. Great book. And he was talking about the fact that freedom of speech was one of the first things that the Nazis used to shut down the church in the beginning of World War II. So I think as Christians, and my thing is, we don't have to be a jerk. We don't have to be provocative and be, stupid, but we should fight to the death for the ability for anyone to speak their mind, because you know what? Culture only gets better when there are multiple voices out there. And when you start shutting people down or shutting perspectives down, trust me, it's Christianity they will go after first.
Well said, Phil. And I've always said about the whole incident in Texas, I agree 100% with what you're saying. I also think we need to interject that respect is a two-way street. And I think we just need to be more respectful in some of these things and not so blatant. But nonetheless, I don't want to see any of this shut down. Speaking of First Amendment, and you're absolutely right, if there is an infringement, I think it'll come after the Christian message before anything else. But aren't we set up for that now with the net neutrality by taking the internet and putting it into a utility? Isn't the next thing now to control content?
Yeah, you know what? The ever-reaching arm of the government never ceases to amaze me. The internet has flourished since its invention. We have gotten amazing, companies like Apple and Microsoft and internet companies and Netflix and Hulu and Amazon have just exploded because of the freedom on the internet. But here the government decides it needs to regulate it. And the great irony of this is they're going to use laws that were invented for regulating the telephone. They're going to use those to regulate the internet. So I just don't get me started on governmental overreach. I think the government is so involved in every stupid, minute, picayune aspect of our lives. It's just staggering. And to think that they now need to regulate the internet is just ridiculous, because we've had such an explosion of ideas and corporations and companies and jobs and in advanced technology the way it was. What's been going wrong? That's what I can't see. They actually asked the government, okay, what is it that needs to be regulated? What's the problem? And the government couldn't come up with a reason. So it's even more terrifying when you think about it that, we don't need more regulation on the internet. Let it go. It's done very, very well since its beginning. Well,
I'm hoping that the members of Congress will go after this and repeal it and bring it back for all the reasons we're talking about. But on the other hand, if you look at the thing called public airways, we broadcasters are in the crosshairs here, because if they can control the content of an internet site, then what's stopping them coming back and say public airways? We have to tell you what's politically correct.
That's exactly right. They've had enormous control historically over television and radio because they declared them public airwaves, and when they do the same with the internet, oh man, that just opens a huge Pandora's box of who can say what and what they're going to curtail, and all of this comes out of hate speech. Mm-hmm. This whole concept of hate speech, that there are certain things that shouldn't be said. It goes, it's that freedom of speech thing again, that pesky freedom of speech thing. Hate speech just opens the door to this multitude of things that you're not supposed to say. You shouldn't say it, because really today, anybody, college campuses are the worst place this happens. But today, anybody can just say, I'm sorry, Perry, but what you just said was hate speech, and we need to stop that. And nobody's going to argue with you. No, you don't have to actually. There's no standard of what hate speech is anymore, and so it's just whatever somebody feels like it is, somebody perceives it is, and all these nebulous things are just, that's what makes things concerning for me.
Can you say fairness doctrine? We broadcasters are well aware of that. Let's come back to terrorism and Christians. Do you think we get this? Are we responding to terrorism correctly?
I don't think so. I just spent some time in South Africa. I was in Israel a few weeks ago, and I travel a lot internationally. And trust me, it is much more of a hot button issue in those places than it is here, particularly in areas in the Middle East. Particularly in Europe, it's in the news every single day. We're relatively insulated in America. We had 9/11 here, but you know what? People seem to have moved on, as tragic as that is. This incident in Garland, Texas, we've kind of moved on already, and that's just been a week. It's just interesting how we live. We don't think of these things, and they're not on our front burner the way they probably should be. So, no, I don't see us having a national leader in the White House that is going to stand up to this. No way do I see that happening. And I'm concerned about Congress, stepping up to the plate. Our military is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I do worry about a time when we're going to have some real serious questions about even our ability. And the other thing is, as our culture goes in a more secular direction, we have no concept of what drives people that, like ISIS, who are militant Islam, advocates. We don't get what the faith, the motivation we don't understand that because people in the U.S. typically today don't understand faith at all. They don't have a faith. So as our culture gets more secular, we even lose the tools of the language to actually talk about what's driving this in the first place. So there's so many things that are going in bad directions. I think Christians need to speak up. They need to write. They need to preach. We need to get our voice heard now more than ever.
Wow, beautifully said, Phil. You know, because I'm beginning to think that in the back of our minds, we think that we can coexist with evil. Evil doesn't want to coexist. No. Evil wants to conquer.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is we can coexist because the Judeo-Christian tradition allows tolerance. But trust me, radical Islam, these guys they're not interested in coexisting at all, not even remotely. So we need to stop looking at them through our lens and start looking at the brutal reality of what we're facing. Wow. I think that's incredibly important.
What are you working on? What's next for you?
Well, I've got a movie coming out in September. I'm executive producer of a new film on Hillsong United. You may have heard of the church Hillsong in Sydney, Australia. They have branches in L.A. and New York and London and Cape Town and Vienna and Kiev and places all over the world. And their band, their number one worship band, Hillsong United, is probably the most famous worship band in the world. They sold out the Hollywood Bowl. They sold out Red Rocks. They sold out Madison Square Garden. And so we did a 90-minute feature film on who they are and what they're about and what drives them. They're funny. They're church employees. They're one of the most famous bands in the world, and yet people don't know who they are, and they're on a church salary. And it's really an interesting story. So Relativity Media, a major Hollywood company here in town, is going to be releasing the film in late September. And I would encourage, talk it up, share it with your people. I think we're releasing to 3,000 screens nationwide.
Wow.
What's funny is, Perry, we did a little research and discovered that 50 million people sing Hillsong music every Sunday around the world. And it's just unbelievable how popular what they do is. And so we wanted to tell the story, and so we did it with we followed them on their world tour last year, ended in a big, huge concert here at the Forum in Los Angeles, and it's going to be an interesting film. So I'd encourage you, talk it up, tell your friends to go see it. It's going to be fun.
Boy, let us know. We'll be glad to promote it for you.
Thank you.
Well, philcooke.com, that's COOKE.com. Check it out. And Phil, you're a delight and an inspiration. How can we pray for you?
Well, you know what? We're balancing clients. We're doing a lot of work. One of our clients is the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and that's a hugely interesting project that people could be praying for. That's a museum that will go in 2017, literally 2 blocks from the Air and Space Museum right there on the main mall. It's going to be a massive, massive museum dedicated to the history and the impact of the Bible. And they've asked us to come on board and help them tell their story. So we're shooting short films and documentaries, and it's going to be very exciting. So I'd encourage you, pray for that. It's going to be huge.
We will do. Thanks, buddy. Good to see you again. Keep up the good work, pal.
You too, Perry. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right, there he is, Phil Cooke. What a great guy. Hey, coming up, another great person, and that is our good friend, Dr. Gene Getz. We'll be talking about the Life Essential Bible and what do we do when our government is not obeying God. Whoa. We'll talk to him about that next here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back, and as always, a delight and an honor to have with us Dr. Gene Getz. He heads up the Center for Church Renewal. He's the chief editor behind the Life Essential Bible, one of the great tools of our day. And we always enjoy having him around. We take on a couple of topics. And I want to tell you, if you're not familiar with this Bible, let me encourage you to check it out. You can go to BiblePrinciples.org and order one there. It's a Bible that has over 1,500 QR codes from Genesis to Revelation. And if you have a QR code reader on your smartphone or your tablet, you can run that over the QR code in the Bible. And up pops Dr. Getz on a video teaching you on the principle on that portion of Scripture. And this is one of my favorite tools of all time, and I can't tell you how resourceful this is. And as we speak, he's renewing and updating some of those videos as well. So you talk about a great resource. Check it out. And by the way, with Father's Day coming up, you may want to consider getting Dad one of these. It's really great. And just go to BiblePrinciples.org. Hi, Gene. How you doing, my friend?
Well, hey, I'm doing good, Perry. By the way, on Father's Day, I just went through my mind when you said that. If they do go to BiblePrinciples.org, there's a place where they can indicate who they want the Bible made to, and I'll personally sign it. That would be a great privilege for me. Great idea, by the way.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, go to BiblePrinciples.org and order one of these for Dad. I tell you, I can't tell you how often I go to bed and I run my phone over one of these QR codes, and up you pop on a principle, and it's just a great resource. Thanks for the commitment and what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much.
We're talking about 2 Chronicles today, faithfulness in difficult circumstances, even if our government leaders are not following God as they should. Boy, if there ever a time.
Yeah, kind of relevant, yeah. And of course, the setting here is the Old Testament, and the kingdom has just been split. Solomon, departed from the will of God, following foreign wives, their gods and evil, and God said, I'm going to split the kingdom. I'm going to honor David. I'm going to keep the southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, for Rehoboam, Solomon's son, and then, of course, Jeroboam became the northern king, and Jeroboam was wicked as all get out. Frequently it says Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and the evil that he did and how kings followed him. But one of the things he did was to set up golden calves in Bethel and Dan so the people wouldn't have to go to Jerusalem, because he was obviously very jealous of Rehoboam. But Rehoboam, of course, being king of the southern tribes, was not a good king either. And one of the interesting things, which is a principle in itself, which I develop in the passage in Kings where this is first treated, basically he goes, first of all, to the elders of Israel, and they tell him to be a humble guy and treat people right, and he rejects that and goes to the younger guys who are power hungry and his own age, and they said, no, clamp down, make it worse, etc. So he followed the advice of the younger generation, and things, of course, deteriorated. It went downhill. But what happened here, and the basis of the principle, is that those who lived in the north would not bow down to those golden calves. And by the way, what Jeroboam did there was exactly what Aaron did at the foot of Mount Sinai, only he made 2 of them. And so he was violating the will of God all over the place, and I think he really knew that. But there were people who said, we're not going to do that. We're going to go all the way to Jerusalem, and we're going to worship God because of our father David. And they did that. But the interesting thing is that the portion there that leads up to the principle, which I've laid right into the text, is it says, those from every tribe of Israel, including those northern tribes, who had determined in their hearts to seek Yahweh, their God, follow the Levites to Jerusalem to sacrifice to Yahweh, to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. So, and here's the key phrase, they strengthened the kingdom of Judah and supported Rehoboam, son of Solomon, for 3 years because they walked in the way of David and Solomon for 3 years. In other words, God, in essence, blessed Rehoboam because of the people of Israel who rejected their king, Jeroboam. They went all the way to Jerusalem to worship God. And so out of that, as I thought about that, that's a principle that we see throughout the Scriptures, right into the New Testament. And that's why the principle reads, Perry, even if our government leaders are not following God as they should, and certainly Rehoboam was not in this case, we're to submit to them, but never to violate God's will. And that obviously is a very key issue there. In fact, you were talking about that in the previous program with Phil. I think that as Christians, we do face a challenge there, but that's a principle I think that grows right out of this Old Testament passage.
All right. I sometimes will talk about our president's policies, and I'll be criticized thinking that I'm criticizing him. I do pray for our president.
Yes, and we should.
And I pray that he'll have a Damascus Road experience.
Yes, I agree.
You know, I mean, seemingly that's what it's going to take. But Christians are really struggling now, especially with the pending decision before the Supreme Court as to whether or not they're going to recognize same-sex marriages. What do we do here, Gene? We're in a real pickle.
We are. Now, fortunately, Perry, we're not like the Christians who lived in the first century under Herod, under Nero, and even during the time of Jesus when he came and taught from the Sermon on the Mount and said we're to be salt, we're to be light, we're to be humble, because they didn't have the rights that we have. They didn't have the freedom that we had. And so consequently, Jesus was dealing with a very hostile environment in which if you cross them in any way, I mean, boom, your life could be taken from you. The same thing was true with slavery. And Paul didn't attack slavery, even though he didn't agree with it. He says, love your slaves as Christ loved you, and slaves serve your masters as you're serving the Lord. And what happened ultimately, it destroyed slavery within the churches, not within the empire, but within the churches. And so they had a whole different environment. But I think we've got to take the principles and apply them in our cultural situation, but utilize all of the freedoms that we have that are unique in the history of the world. For example, for you to sit here on television and say anything against the president, to disagree with him, and of course you did that graciously. I mean, you listen to some of the talk shows and some of the things they're saying and the way they're saying it today, and politicians and all that. We do have freedom of speech, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, giving us the freedom to voice our opinions, but not only voice our opinions, but to act and do the things that we should do. And one of the greatest things is to vote our conscience. I mean, we still have that freedom to vote and to understand. And I think, Perry, one of the things that I'm concerned about, I know I share your concern, is how many evangelical Christians, number one, don't stay up to date on what's going on. And number two, they don't take advantage of the freedoms that we have to express our opinions and to vote. And to me, that's just wrong. And so anyway, I think certainly in your question, what can we do, is to be responsible citizens using the freedom we have, but never, as the principle says, to violate the will of God. And we just have a lot of freedom without violating the will of God or even violating the laws of our country.
Okay, and I think there's another little application here, Gene. It's primarily talking to the individual. We, as an individual, shouldn't violate the will of God, even though our leadership may be. So I realize that's a delicate line, but if we stay true to the principles, if we stay true to the ordinances and the laws of God, but if we're forced to violate them, that's when, I guess, when we draw the line.
That's right, absolutely. And we're fortunate in a country where we're not put in that kind of situation. I mean, if we were living in some of these cultures today where ISIS and other radicals are trying to take over the government, Christians have to be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves in a way that even to preserve their lives. But again, when their backs are against the wall in terms of reject Christ or else, that's the line. And thankfully, I'm not facing that, you're not facing that. And New Testament Christians did.
Gene,
All face it.
In your experience in being in ministry and pastoring and where you are now, did you ever think that as Christians we would be facing these potential pressures of being forced to violate God's will or law in America?
Never thought about it. Of course, I've been in the ministry quite a few years, but, the very fact that the potential, if I get up and read the first chapter of the book of Romans in a church service, that I could go to prison? I mean, you say, could that ever happen? Well, it's actually happening in some other parts of the world, as I understand, where Paul is actually speaking, out against homosexuality. And we get up and we read the scriptures, and that violates the laws of the land. I hope we never face it.
Yeah.
But it could happen.
I agree with you. I think we're not careful. Talk radio is so cynical, it makes us angry and can remove us what our Christian responsibilities are. We may not like what's going on, but are we praying for those who are making those decisions, and are we praying against the influences of those decisions?
Right, and that takes us right to Paul's letter to Timothy, when he says, first of all, Timothy, pray for all those in authority. And when he wrote that, Nero was in power and was going to take his life. Herod was in power. Felix, Festus, those guys, all evil. And he said, pray for them. But he said, pray for them that we might have peace and tranquility in order to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I think as Christians, we have to be very careful that we don't, on one hand, get super critical of what's happening, at the same time neglect the priority that you just outlined. I think that, to me, and churches ought to be rallying, pastors ought to be rallying their people to pray and to carry out that. And that, if they were praying for Nero and Herod and those guys, what about our president, vice president, all of those in authority? I think we neglect that. The power of prayer, and that God does honor that.
Beautifully said. All right, we're going to take a break here. We're talking to Dr. Gene Getz. He's the chief editor of the Life Essential Bible. Everything we're talking about here is in video form, put into a QR code inside this Bible. And if you have a QR reader on your smartphone or your tablet, up pops Dr. Getz and one of these principles in a video form. It's a terrific resource. And with Father's Day coming up, go to BiblePrinciples.org and order one of these Bibles, and then tell Gene your dad's name, and he'll personalize it for you. When we come back, we're going to talk to a guy that has never made a mistake on helping us who have made a mistake. Hang in there, Gene. I'll let you clarify that.
That's a good cheese, my friend.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. Compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with our good friend Dr. Gene Getz. He's the chief editor of the Life Essential Bible, and he also heads up the Center for Church Renewal. And again, jot this website down, BiblePrinciples.org. Pretty simple, huh? BiblePrinciples.org. And you can order one of these Life Essential Bibles from that website. And for Father's Day coming up, you may want to get one for Dad and let him know, and he'll personalize it for you. But what makes this Bible so unique and so powerful is that from Genesis to Revelation, you're going to find about 1,500 QR codes in there, where if you have a QR reader on your smartphone or your tablet, you just run that over there, and up pops a video with Dr. Gene, and he'll speak anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes on a basic Bible principle of that portion of Scripture. It is outstanding. So let me encourage you to check it out. By the way, Gene, there's another little thing that we've created. Our time together here, we put this up on our YouTube site through our website, and people will take one of these segments and use it as a basis of a home Bible study with a group.
Oh, wonderful.
So as you and I are chatting, they'll pick up after our conversation and carry on with it. So it's kind of interesting.
Wow, it really is. Hey, by the way, just a little continuity. You were talking with Phil about the event and what happened here in Garland, Texas. It gets pretty relevant when I realize that happened 5 miles from my home. where I live.
Wow.
And now we're the center of world discussion on how we should behave in relationship to the attacks that we're experiencing from ISIS. So, you think about that, when it comes close to home, you really begin to think about it.
What's interesting about that whole thing, Gene, is not only was it a First Amendment issue, it was obviously a Second Amendment issue. The Second Amendment protected the First Amendment. But you know what's kind of missing in all of this is the issue of respect. Respect is a two-way street. And I respect the fact that they have the right to do it, but were they being respectful in what they were doing? That's another part of the argument.
And what is the deeper motive there, other than just free speech? What is the deeper motive? And tit for tat or aggravation? I agree with you. We've got to take a look at that.
All right, let's go over to the book of Joshua. We're going to deal with handling mistakes. I know you've never made any, so you can walk us through this.
Oh, yeah.
But there are times we must live with our mistakes, accepting the fact that we cannot correct something we did wrong by making another wrong decision. Whoa. Right. Man, you're hitting me between the eyes this morning.
Well, hey, that one grows out of the life of a great guy, Joshua, and that God used. And wow, he's one of the great examples in the Old Testament. So many of them made huge mistakes, and he didn't make a lot of major mistakes. He made them, but he was a godly man, and he made a mistake in relationship to the Gibeonites. And the Gibeonites, of course, lived within the land. And Joshua didn't realize that, neither did the leaders of Israel, but the Gibeonites knew, and this is fascinating, they actually knew that God had told the children of Israel before they ever came into the land of Canaan that if they treated people right who lived outside the borders of Canaan, they would have mercy on them, and they should have mercy on them. So the Gibeonites, very wisely, from the human point of view, made up this scenario of the fact they came from a faraway country, and with all of their wine and their bread moldy and their clothes falling apart and so forth, and they came and said, "Hey, we want to make a treaty with you, and we don't want to be destroyed." And Joshua didn't investigate the situation carefully, and lo and behold, 3 days later, they realized they lived among them. But what they had done was to really, in the name of God, make this treaty, this covenant, that they would let them live. And so consequently, that was another point the Gibeonites were probably aware of, that if they reversed a decision like that, it would bring reproach on the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so Joshua was caught in the sense that, two wrongs don't make a right. Because if they had gone ahead and violated their covenant in the name of God, then that would have brought reproach on the name of God. And so they had to live with that mistake. And so the principle, I think, that grows out of that, as you stated, is there are times we have to live with our mistakes. Joshua had to do that, accepting the fact that we cannot correct something we did wrong. He could not correct that by making the wrong decision. So, as you flow that into the New Testament, take marriage, for example. Paul wrote very clearly that we're not to be mismatched or joined together with unbelievers. Now, he doesn't say marriage per se, but it doesn't take much thought to comprehend that if we are married, we are joined in a unique way, according to God's plan. And if we join ourselves to an unbeliever, then we're in violation of the will of God. Well, what happens if we say, I made a mistake? Well, God goes on to say, I'm honoring that marriage, even though you stepped out of my will. And for you to divorce now would be another sin. You have to live with a mistake, but here's how you live with that mistake. So I think that there's a principle here from Genesis to Revelation in relationship to how we live. Now, fortunately, most of the mistakes we make, we can correct. We really can. We may have some residual consequences, but we can correct those. But there are some we have to live with it and then go on from that point living according to the will of God. Does that make sense?
All right, let me squeeze your pastor heart for a moment. Why do we run from a mistake? In doing so, we actually compound the problem. What is it about, even though we're supposedly born again and regenerated, we make a mistake, we don't admit it, we run from it?
Well, that's pride. That's arrogance. Let's take parents, for example, a father or a mother, and they make a huge mistake with their kids, but they won't admit it. But their kids know all about it. I mean, it's awfully surface thinking, and let me use the word stupidity applied to myself. The best way to win respect and correct a mistake is to admit that mistake. We win respect rather than losing it. If we try to cover it, if we never apologize, if we never admit it, we lose respect. And I think, by the way, and I think we could say this graciously, I think at the highest levels of the land, we see huge mistakes that have been made in our government, but never an admission of fault. And what happens when the majority of people know that it was a mistake and you don't admit it? What happens?
Well, we got the chaos we got. Where does James chapter 5 come into this? Confess your faults one to another.
Well, that applies. Obviously, it's written to believers where we are to acknowledge mistakes, confess our sins. And by the way, that's in the context especially of healing. And I think that it's dealing with emotional healing and spiritual healing. And if we don't admit that we've sinned, we're going to live with the guilt of that sin. And to live with guilt of sin is devastating to our total being, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And thank God that the blood of Christ continues to cleanse us from all sin. But if we're going to walk in fellowship with God and with a clear conscience, then we have to acknowledge our sins and restore that fellowship with God and with other people.
Beautifully said. Well, this is a great principle. You may want to check it out in Joshua chapter 9. And again, let me just say, BiblePrinciples.org is the website if you want to get one of these Bibles. And I highly encourage it. This thing is such a tremendous resource. I know Gene's not listening, but there's time I'm asked to speak publicly and I'm dry as a bone, so I'll pull him up and steal his message and go preach it.
I'm listening and I'm honored. I'm honored.
And
just make sure I'm speaking the truth.
Oh, well, you know, and I give you full credit for it, kind of, sort of. But anyway, go to BiblePrinciples.org, and if you order one of these Bibles for Father's Day, what are you going to do here?
I'll sign it, and if they'll just let us know, they can do that right on the web when they order it. By the way, when they go to BiblePrinciples.org, they go to the store and they can find 10 different covers and kinds of Bibles that they would like. They can make their choice, and then they can just let us know if they want me to sign it and to whom I should sign it, and I'll personalize it, and I'd be honored. I'm always honored to do that, humbled, in fact.
Well, let me encourage you. This is an incredible resource, and it has, like I said, 1,500 QR codes between Genesis and Revelation. And as you pull it up on your smartphone or your tablet through the QR code, there's a great Bible study. And let me encourage you to get a copy. And again, if you want to give us a couple of hours, our discussion with Dr. Gene will be up on the Dove website here in a little bit. You can pull that off and use that as well as a basis for your Bible study. By the way, Gene, I'm getting great comments from your Bible principles on our radio stations.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
praise the Lord.
Yeah, people love them. So you're a hero out west here.
Oh, hey, I'm honored and humbled.
Okay, thanks, buddy. Good to see you. We'll see you next time, okay?
God bless.
Okay, God bless. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.